Welcome to Book Cuddle. I'm your host, Karen Reader with Readgab. Today, our guest is Jasminne Paulino, and she wrote this incredible novel and verse that we are going to talk about today, The Extraordinary Orbit of Alex Ramirez. What I want to do first is just have Jasmine take a second and introduce yourself. Tell us about you separate from being an author.
Oh, well, I'm a Spanish teacher. I teach children in grades 3 through 5. I'm a parent. I'm a bookworm for sure. That's tapping into the author thing, but I live in the children's book section of every bookstore or library. Those are my safe spaces, and I love holding picture books close to my heart. So there's that piece about me.
Yes, right? That's some things just connect to you as an author, right? It's a part of you.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about me without like getting into some sort of writerly thread.
Right? That's
Yeah.
part of who you are. Absolutely. All right, so let's do an author icebreaker. So I've got this book, Wish Monster by J.A. White, and the book's so much about consequences of wishes, but that's all right. It's
Yeah.
a big thing that they go into though, is they're given opportunities to make wishes and just their dreams. What is something that you would wish for?
I think I have a two parts to
Oh,
that
great.
answer. The first would be just a wish being able to like have a moment where like you can will something into your life. It would be like hearing my mother's voice again. It
Um,
is like the first thing that bubbles up in my mind. And then something entirely different is being able to close my eyes and have my favorite Cuban dish, which is ropa vieja. There's
okay.
a there's a restaurant in Miami that I adore. And whenever I think about comfort foods that I can get outside of my home, that restaurant always comes to mind. They're ropa vieja. So if I could just close my eyes and have that, that would be amazing.
Beautiful. Ah, food is something that resonates with me,
Oh,
yes. And
always,
certain
always.
places just make it the best, right?
Right.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. All right, so tell us about The Extraordinary Orbit of Alex Ramirez. For those who've never heard of it, tell us what is this about?
It's a middle grade novel in verse about a seventh grader who is neurodivergent and he loves all things NASA and dreams of becoming an astronaut one day. But he's in a self-contained classroom, which means most of his school day takes place in the same room. And he's convinced that if he takes the mainstream science class, that that'll get him closer to his astronaut dreams. But then in order to get into that classroom, he has to convince his parents and educators and navigate some friendship circles in order to get that much closer to what his heart wants.
Oh, yes, there's so much emotion. I think this is one of the things that I love about novels in verse is the way that the emotion is conveyed. And there's so much emotion going on here.
I love novels in verse as a reader, as a writer. I think that they provide a great opportunity to lean into rhythm and voice and give both the reader and your main character moments to breathe within the story. Hello, white space. I'm a huge fan of that.
Yes, right?
It was a great feeling to dive into this story and lean into Alex's voice and allow him to exist in a novel in verse.
Yeah, and the reader, yeah, that white space, it just feels so much more consumable. It doesn't feel threatening to see that. I had never thought about that, just defining it as, look, white space, yes. And when you see some of the ones that just have really short lines, it's like, oh, that's exciting. I can get through that page fast. It's like
That was
having short chapters, right?
that was another huge like inspiration to lean into novels in verse. My son, when he was much younger,
Mhm.
was a reluctant reader, and me being the bookworm that I am, and I'd always take him and his sisters to bookstores, and they'd pick up books. And there was one day where he picked up a book, and he said, "Mom, I really want to read this, but the pages are too busy."
Ah,
And then I started to look into like we started graphic novels and novels
yes.
in verse. And then I always thought that I'd want to write a story that wouldn't make a kid like him. And there are many
Overwhelmed,
kids like
yeah.
him feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, yeah, there's something to that. Do you know what? It's funny when I got my son Dune, the graphic novel, and I opened it and I was like, I felt that was too busy because there's so much illustration packed in every single square. Because some
Right.
of them, the way they're laid out, so different things can feel busier. Because for me, the
Yes.
the visual was so, some graphic novels I've loved, but yeah, there was just so much packed into the page because it's a big, big book to shove in. It took two parts. But yeah, I am excited that he was able to tell you that in words too, because
Yeah,
I
it was.
tell my 9-year-old, I'm like, those are great words to describe that for me. That helps me understand now.
Yeah, and the trick is, yes, so you're being extremely intentional about how many words go on the page and inviting that white space, but still filling those pages with so much emotion.
Hmm.
So that was also something that I enjoyed as I wrote the story.
So, going along with that, can you tell us more about things that inspired you to write the book? You talked about the novels in verse. Tell us about, doing a self-contained classroom, doing Alex in particular.
There are multiple pieces to like the heart and the inspiration behind like getting to that point in June 2022 and feeling like there was a story that I've been building in my head throughout my life and that it needed to come out in some way. So there are pieces of me being neurodivergent as a child and trying to figure out why was I successful in some classrooms and not so much in others, feeling like there were so many things that I wanted to say to the adults around me, whether they were teachers or my parents, but feeling like I couldn't. And then being an educator and working in spaces with children who were often overlooked, but they had so much magic within them, then eventually becoming a parent and having children who are neurodiverse, one who spent a fair amount of time in a self-contained classroom and would come back home with so many observations and things that I knew his educators didn't think that he was processing in his brain.
Yes.
So all of that, I just got to a point where like this, like there are kids like my son, there are kids like me, there are kids in that in the spectrum of being neurodiverse who have stories within them and voices, and I want them to move on the page. So that definitely led me to Alex. My son, again, being a huge inspiration for this story, was obsessed with all things NASA, and his first steps into the mainstream did occur in a science class. So that definitely also bled into this novel in verse.
I love that so much. I think that I could feel that this is something that was personal for you as I read this, because
Mm.
you conveyed that so well and so powerfully in there that this was not something that you just researched. This was something that was close to home.
Yeah, I've read this story so many times, and there are still moments, poems in this story where like I'll have to like take a break because
Right?
it takes me back to a moment in time. As I was drafting this, I had my son and his sister read parts of the story. There was one day where his sister said like I don't want to read that one because I remember that day, and it was
Oh,
hard for her to process that.
wow. Wow. Oh my gosh, that makes me emotional. Wow.
I'm just thinking about her reading it and taking that break also like plays a number on my head.
Oh wow. Wow. That's amazing. Tell us what you hope readers will take from this.
I hope readers, young people, feel that if there's something that they're carrying in their heart, even if it's like something small and they think no one will listen, there are the great thing is, and my son experienced this and I experienced it later in life, is that there are helpers and people who are ready to listen and make you feel seen. So if a young person feels like there's that invitation to like think past their first thought, to lean into that and find the helpers and know that whatever it is that they have inside matters.
Yeah. Oh. And I hope, I wish we could just have this, required reading in school. It's required reading for adults. Like,
But yeah,
It would
there's the
help
other
so
part.
many like adults too to see because me as the teacher and me as the mom, it helped me just put on a different hat and be like, wow, and think about things in so many different ways of just reading these points of view. It was
Right.
powerful. And I feel like this book has just changed me for the better. And I'm already minded about that. I don't have a diagnosis, but I'm next to positive that I'm ADHD. And I do have neurodiverse children and I have neurodiverse students. And so it was something I've always been mindful about. But
Right.
I feel like this book changed me for the better to think and do better.
That, well, there's the other part, what I hope young readers will
Yes.
get from it, and then what I hope, being an educator
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
that my fellow educators get from this. And it's a tricky position to be in when you're both an educator, a parent, and someone who is also neurodiverse. And I'm hoping that educators will lean into seeing kids past
Yeah.
their individualized education plan. I know that, for instance, like when we think those who are in education, especially those in special education, when you
Right.
think about self-contained, there's an image that comes to mind. There are children that you think of,
Oh, immediately. Yes.
and not knowing that every self-contained classroom works differently, that there are schools, unfortunately, that will find ways to put kids who are not entirely mainstream and not so self-contained, and then they'll put them in these classrooms because they can get away with it, and
Right.
then the children suffer for it. And then there are kids like Alex, and I've lived this personally, who will go back home and share. And then yeah, it put me in the role of like advocating for him when
Yes.
he's younger, and then teaching him to do that for himself, which he can do now.
Yeah.
But that also obviously plays a piece in
Such
this.
a powerful, powerful thing. Do you think that all people are capable of achieving something great?
I do. I think great looks different. As
Yes.
long as you're not trying to force a great dress
Yeah.
onto every child, then
Right.
you're fine. I've always said that's something that I've said as a parent and as an educator to the kids in my circles, where like you try your best, and your best doesn't have to be someone else's best.
No. No, like, so I actually also teach fitness. And that's one of the things when I'm starting a class, I'm like, don't look at what somebody else is doing. You're here for your workout. And I know this is a very different thought, but I think it's something people can relate to because you're at a different point in your life actively. And so
Right,
people are at a different point, and I like that. Don't let somebody else define your great. Don't let somebody, establish what your education goals can be, what your future goals could be. And I think that, like with Alex, I bet the teachers didn't realize his ambitions and goals concerning NASA. They probably, because they have these certain worksheets that they're always giving out. And
right,
so they didn't even realize his dreams and passions. And they had, good intentions. Let's talk about these good intentions. Yeah, there's just this point in the book where these adults with very good intentions come
yeah,
up with a great project that they think they're going to do something great for them.
right,
But it's really embarrassing for Alex and his friends. So
right.
how can adults avoid embarrassment? How can adults help kids find their great?
A conversation. I think oftentimes, especially with the moment that you're alluding to, where like they have this work study opportunity, and they're having the kids do run a coffee cart at the middle school.
Mhm.
There are places that do a beautiful job of that.
Right.
But I think oftentimes, if you're not being intentional, and you're not having a conversation, and you're just introducing without listening, you run
Right.
the risk of this idea falling flat. And that's an understatement, because what it did was essentially make this child and his friends feel like they weren't part of the community. Like
Right.
everyone else gets to do their middle school kid thing. And here we are wearing aprons. Our picture is on the district website. Why? Like no one asked. It was
Right.
just assumed that this was what they wanted to do. This is going to be helpful.
They're
good
like, they
intentions.
were probably excited about it. They're like, this is a good thing.
It's
Right?
a one-sided version of good
Yeah.
intention, but good intentions without conversation, without that piece, it runs the risk of not of making a young person feel unheard.
Yeah, I think so. And these kids who they think, they're trying to do things as adults, what will be best? And they probably sat around a table and talked about it and brainstormed great ideas. But
Right.
these great ideas, these kids need to be involved at any age, at
Yeah.
any communication level.
Mhm.
You can get communication from them. You
Of
can you
course.
can figure out a way. Yeah.
And again, there are places I've known towns that were like there are special educators that have done a beautiful job of running programs like it,
Yes.
creating coffee shops outside of the community that have like employed
Yeah.
these young people once they've graduated from high school. There's a way to do it,
Right.
but and there's also a way to like have it fail miserably. And
Mhm.
I've seen that happen, and I wanted to account for it in this story because it is a risk that you run when you're not being careful about the programs that you introduce to children who've already have had to contend with so much
Right.
throughout their lives.
Right. How can adults help kids advocate for themselves?
That's a question for educators, for parents, but again, I think this goes back to like that question, that moment when a young person feels like there's a thought that keeps like running through their mind, and encouraging children to like have feedback and share that and never feel like it isn't important. So creating those moments where like, so what do you think?
Right.
Do you just inviting opinions
Right.
it would, I think, mark the beginning of encouraging children to advocate for themselves and not doing it for them. I
Right.
think
Yes.
there's
Having them be the one to speak, to say, to do.
right, and like because then that can become an issue if you're assuming that they can't,
Right.
that they're not able to process, that they won't have something to share. Then you're not teaching them that there are spaces where like their opinions matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So for a child how can we help them see the need to advocate? Because, children are used to having things taken care of for themselves. So why? Why should it be important for a child to advocate for themselves?
I remembered having this conversation with my son when he was in middle school and reminding him that he was fortunate in that he had a home where like his mom, where we listened to him, dad listened to him. He had like some great helpers at school that also listened to him, but that we also live in a world where people don't know that you have ADHD. People don't know the things that your profile. And most of the time, the world just doesn't care. So unless you let them know who you are and the things that you need, it'll become incredibly difficult for you to make your way in spaces outside of home, outside of school. So there were moments when we'd go off on vacation and he was hungry and I'd encourage him. I remember like being on a cruise and I won't get you your lunch. You can go up to the counter and ask for it. So
Right.
it started with something small like that. And now, like, for instance, he's in high school and he has like conversations with his case manager and guidance
Cool.
counselor and will like figure out answers because he knows the world's tough, mom, right? So I have
Right.
to figure it out. And then he'll like, it's a check-in with himself and a check-in with me.
Cool.
So, and it took baby steps when he was younger, and now that he's like 16 years old, he can advocate for himself
Yeah.
and make sure that like he has accommodations in place when he feels that they're necessary.
Yeah. I was watching this training actually for preschool teachers,
Yeah.
and it was empowering a 4-year-old to say, I don't like that to their peers or to their teachers, even to be able to say, no, I don't like that. Because, so often they just react. They just do because something was done to them. and they don't always react in a good way or whatever, but just a simple phrase starting young and then working on it, like you were saying, baby steps.
Yeah.
But we've always got to be helping kids because one day these kids are going to be adults.
I've always made that abundantly to all of my kids, not just like my son, who was definitely, he observes everything. At a very young age, I also encouraged him to keep a journal.
Hmm.
Um, so that like whenever there were those moments in time where like he was carrying something and he couldn't find the right words, that he could draw them out. And he
Nice.
actually like I have looked at some of the journals that he kept when he
Uh-huh.
was younger, and they're kind of like graphic novels in that
Cool.
he draws out situations featuring obviously myself or his
Yeah.
dad and his sister or friends in school.
Right.
But there were things that he shared on those pages through images and speech bubbles that I know he wasn't ready to say out loud at the
Yeah.
time, but that was also like his beginning in self-advocacy. So, besides like creating those moments in real time for children to use their voice, there's also like the encouragement to like when you're not ready, those thoughts should go somewhere because then that's also a validating experience for a child.
Well, and it's so important. I just was talking to mine last night. I was like, it is so important for the emotions to come out.
Yeah.
It is important that they come, like, not be yelling or hurting other people, but they still need to come out some way. And so I think that's so neat that you helped him get journaling and drawing. And so, but you're also talking about, that sometimes it was about you and the parents.
Right.
Our own point of view is so important, but how do we help somebody understand that? Because I love this about the book, that the different helpers at the school, and
Yes.
then, the different teachers and administrators, and then even in the home, the sister, the mom, and the dad for Alex, each
Mhm.
interpret things so differently and then have different reactions to things.
Yeah.
So, how do we help kids see a reason? And then start to see all sides of the interpretations of reactions.
For Alex, it wasn't, as you know, immediate. He has a complicated relationship with his mom, where
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
mom's always in the way. Mom's going to worry, and then her worries make him worry. And it takes him a while, as it takes mom a while to realize. It takes them both some time to realize their rhythm.
yeah,
And and then there's dad in the picture who wants to listen and is kind of like a huge cheerleader in the
yes.
family and helps
Well,
mom.
and they have that connection of similar interest.
They do have that connection. And then there's a sister who isn't neurodiverse and is very much about like trying to figure things out and like giving Alex the lowdown on what'll work at the middle school.
Yeah.
And
I
it
love the sister. And she advocates for him. Yeah,
She does. And the beauty to this family, even when the mom is struggling and Alex feels like he compares her to a solar eclipse. That's a hard one because and that's what he felt in his heart. Um, I think it's special to communicate a message of here's a family with very different humans and they all love this one human and
yeah,
they're trying to figure things out. And it's a not so linear way. Mom doesn't get it right away. Dad also needs to give mom space and reminders to really see the situation and Alex for who he is. It it's real life in real time,
yeah,
and I think it sends the message of it's okay to take your time as long as like your heart is in the right place and you're
right.
working towards an end of understanding.
Yes. And I think that's so hard to help everybody see that each person's heart is there because that mom loves him. And that mom was so crushed probably when he had to become self-contained and when what led to him being in a self-contained classroom.
Right.
And so she's scared for him, right? She's a protector. She's being a mom. She's trying to protect. And it's neat to see her eyes opened as well. And she comes around to different things, but she has her reasons too. And so to help help individuals see that we have our reasons and we're trying to do what's best. And I love that the teacher saw with the coffee cart that it was like, oh, whoops, whoops, like because she
Right.
had her reasons. We all have our reasons, but both sides need to have eyes opened that it's good intention. So let's communicate.
And that's like that's also like I love the teacher because she's doing her job.
Yes.
And but the minute not the minute it takes a while for her to come to the realization where like maybe I need to like listen and calculate what my next moves are going to be, not just with Alex, but with all of the kids.
Yes.
Because like we don't have it all figured out. We're adults, whether we're parents or educators. It's okay to say, I don't know. I've had moments like that with my children where like I don't know, or I probably should have reacted in a different way, and let's talk about that now. And I've seen educators do the same thing where like when that humanity shows up, there's like you can move forward. You can figure things out in a healthy way.
Right. It's a good thing to admit to being wrong, or it's a good thing to say, I maybe didn't do that right, or I'm figuring this out too. We're doing this together. I mean, I'm well intentioned, but sometimes I do things wrong.
I hope to see that. I hope that the book encourages both families and educators to own that part of their lives where like this is what I know, maybe I don't, let's talk about it.
Right. Tell us about creating the title because I mean, I know it's so much about space,
Right.
but when you were figuring out the words that would describe this book, why did you choose these ones?
You're the story behind the title is one that I hold near and dear to my heart because I did not come up with the title to this book. I have an incredible writer friend. Her name is Kate Fussner, who also writes novels in verse. And I was struggling with the title for this book. I don't love titles, whether they're for like the stories that I write or the poems that I often write. Titles are not my thing. And she had read some like earlier versions of this story. And I had texted her, this was summer 2023,
Okay.
mentioned I just like I'm not landing on the right ground for this title. And then I went to get a glass of water and I heard my phone ping. And when I went to my phone, she like casually wrote, "Oh, what about the extraordinary orbit of Alex Ramirez?" She knew his name.
Yes.
And that as soon as I read it, I knew that was the
Me.
title for the
Me. You saw
story.
it and it was
So she is
meant to
a
be the book.
100% accountable for that title. And I love it so much. There's a rhythm there, there's a beauty to that
Okay.
title that is perfect for Alex and his journey.
I, well, and doesn't each poem have a title? Every one of the
It
poems
they
has a
do.
title.
Yes, they do.
And I didn't even think about this, and so I had to go back and look at it. One thing that I love to do in preparation for these interviews is go and read, usually on Goodreads is where I go, but I go and read reviews, other people's reviews. I don't ever do it before I read the book because I don't want it to affect the way that I read the book, and often there's spoilers.
Right.
But then I go later after I've read the book in preparation for an interview and see what other people took from it and how other people reacted. And one person said, and each title, just had these words and these meanings to it. And that I was like, I hardly ever read titles of chapters or of poems. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am missing power in words by skipping over these titles of the verses. And this person got so much just out of the titles.
Yeah, the title of the story was hard. That one again, like I have an incredible friend who fell in love with the story and just had
Yes.
the just right title for it. What I do love about when I write novels in verse is having that first word or the first few words kind of like it's like the leading you into what the
Yes.
poem is. That was fun.
Cool.
The title for the story again
Was
was different.
something different, but the
Yeah, no, that
titles
one.
for each verse were
Yeah.
like getting you ready for what the verse would be. And
Yeah, and it was fun to play with the title, the different titles of the poems, because again, like some of them were in Spanish, others were in English.
yes,
They incorporated both. So that was an interesting part to that piece.
that's neat. Well, I love it.
Mhm.
Tell us, you talked about how much you love books. Tell us one that you would love to recommend for our listeners.
Oh man, I my kids influence like my this answer, but Merci, Suárez Changes Gears by Medina is a book that I love. It was the first middle grade book that my daughter read. And
Mhm.
she was like in her like first few pages in, and I remember exactly, I was in the kitchen. She ran over to me and said, "Mom, not only does this girl look like me, but her family sounds like us." And it
Cool.
was the first time she had read something middle grade that felt like a part of her. So
Yes.
that was really special. And that book is like always in my brain because of that. And then I was actually in Chicago recently visiting the Writers Museum.
Right?
And I found corduroy. I've loved corduroy as a kid. And I reread it while at the Writers Museum, and I know why it like has like over time always been in my brain, where
Yeah.
like there's this like cute teddy bear and he's
Right?
different. He doesn't have a button, and the mom tells the little girl in the story like there's something wrong with him. Like we can find you something else.
Right?
And he's sad, and he goes on this like journey on like fixing himself so that he's wanted. And it's something that like it makes sense for kid me to have connected with that thread in that story because it's something that is always with me as I write, whether they're picture books or middle grade, that sense of like I'm different but like I matter too is
Neat.
all over corduroy and all over my career as a writer.
Oh, that's so neat. And corduroy, it's just so timeless like that.
Oh,
You know what I mean? That it doesn't have some little timestamp on it. It's one that can stand the test of time. And it's beautiful.
yeah.
And it's neat to think about that because I haven't thought about corduroy in so long. But I just recently was organizing picture books and I had a stack of some corduroy and different versions of corduroy.
Yeah.
And I love hearing you say what that theme did to you and how it affected you. That is so neat.
It did. I was also afraid of escalators as a child, and I remember getting to that. I remember that being a big part of the story where I was like, man, if he could do it, then I could do it. So
Yes.
thinking about that as again, I reread, I hadn't, I think about it a lot, but I hadn't given myself the time to like sit with it and think about
Right.
why is this story always in my brain? Oh, I know.
Now that I reread it as an adult and see
As
that,
an
like,
adult, it makes
oh,
all the sense in the world to me.
I love that so much. We need to go back and revisit our books from the past. And I think that we remember certain things, but we might be surprised what we forgot.
Yeah.
That's so neat. Thank you, Jasmine, so much
Oh,
for
this,
taking the time to talk to us. Thank you for this beautiful, empowering book. I hope everybody, whether it's somebody who needs to be seen or if it just gives compassion to a reader who is a young reader or an adult, oh my gosh, I think there's so much the adults can also take from this one. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Jasmine.
oh, thank you for having me. I loved talking books and self-advocacy and all the things in between. This has been so much fun.
Yes, thank you.